Hey everyone, Brian Zane here, and I'm joined by Mister OohLaLa, who is out of the sequence today. He's here to talk to me about a very, very big issue. How you doing, Mister?
Bonjour. Hi everybody.
Yes, this is...
I'm just doing great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I tell you what, one thing I've learned in the last few years doing this channel is never try and do a move when breaking news is just liable to happen any old time. I was driving up to Oregon with a trailer load full of stuff, mister, and of course I'd already published This Week in Regret. I said, I'm going to publish it early, I'm going to get it done and out of the way, and sure enough, the curse continues, and I find out that Vince McMahon has retired from WWE / stepped down amidst a sex scandal. But mister, did you ever really expect Vince McMahon to retire from the company that he created?
I honestly did not. You know, being a lifetime WWF fan, I still call it WWF, unless I really think about it. I've got 80s WWF flowing through my veins, so, you know, I've had my eye on Vince McMahon pretty much my whole life. I expected, as he had stated before, that he would die in the chair. I mean, his mom lived to be like 100 years old.
Something like that, yeah.
And he lived
she's still alive, isn't she?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And he lived a very healthy, virile lifestyle, for better or for worse. You know, took pretty good care of himself physically. Probably didn't get enough sleep. Probably overworked himself. I just wondered, like, what the hell? What's he going to do now? You know?
Yeah, I mean, the future is certainly unknown, but I think the shock of him retiring, it's shocking, but also not, because I know a lot of people, myself included, thought, oh, these Wall Street Journal stories are coming, there's a slow drip, there's word of another one coming out in the next week or so, and so it feels like damage control. This whole last month has felt like damage control, hasn't it? Like Vince coming out and just like doing a little dance, Titus O'Neil declaring WWE a safe haven, and like, oh, it was all just kind of like, it seemed like it was window dressing, basically.
It feels to me it's part damage control. It's also Vince just bucking up against, you know, the same way he sent the letters to Time Warner advertisers about WCW, the same way, you know, complaining that they stole his talent when he did the same thing 10 years ago and gutted the territories. To me, it was defiant Vince. It was bully Vince. It was gingerbread man Vince. Ha ha ha, you can't catch me. Look, I'm going to jump off the top of the stairs to the floor. I'm invincible.
Aren't I quirky for 77?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just such a unique individual, you know?
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, and all the stories of him, like, when he came back from that first appearance after the story broke, he's like, fuck him. And, like, he definitely felt invincible, it seems. And, like, he's gotten away with so much over the years where, yeah, hey, if I were Vince McMahon, I'd probably feel bulletproof, too, after everything that's happened.
What if WWF had never gone public? Would we even be dealing with this?
Yeah, I tell you.
Would he even be able to be forced out? I mean, you got to think something big is coming, and just, you know, there's the Real Sports documentary that's imminent where apparently they have people on camera talking about all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard rumors that another Wall Street Journal article is going to be coming down the pike, and like it seems like this is going to be the big one, folks. Like,
it has to be bad.
Yeah, it has to be really bad if it's compelling. Either Vince sees the writing on the wall, or everyone else is like, you got to get the fuck out. Like, we can't have this heat on us anymore.
But isn't that like the most? I mean, you worked in the news field for years and years. Yeah. Isn't that like the most like news thing ever? Instead of just like big dump of all this stuff, they're like, no, we're going to meter it out and string you along and give you all these little details. But, you know, people talk, and then people who have experienced stuff similar to this, oh, well, I guess, you know, I'll tell my story too. So it could be that. I don't want to be too cynical, but...
Yeah, when the first Wall Street Journal story broke, and then there was an article published about Rita Chatterton's story, and then Mario Mancini was the first wrestler to corroborate that, and it's like, ooh, this feels like, if it's stirring that stuff up from that long ago, like, you know there's other skeletons in that closet that are just, like, dying to come out now.
He conquered the wrestling world. That wasn't enough. So what other place in his life can he find to suck up power and take power from people?
Yeah.
Because when you do this kind of stuff with, you know, women, it's not about sex, it's about power. Vince McMahon could hire a sex worker every night, you know, for $12 million. That's like 16 years or whatever
do the math,
of you know, like legitimate, everybody's agreeing to it. encounters, but he didn't want that. He wanted to control people. He wanted to use his money to make people do things they don't want to do.
Yeah. And people want to talk about the NDAs as if they're not as people want to say, oh, it's NDAs, it's just accusations, it's just rumors. No, NDAs are there because something happened, and now there's a thing in place where you're legally not allowed to talk about it. So it's not like, oh, this is just he said, she said. Like, something apparently happened, and then a lawyer had to intervene.
Yeah, you really think that Vince McMahon, somebody's going to accuse Vince McMahon of something he didn't do, and he's going to be like, oh, sure, here's some money. Hell no. Hell no. He would drag them through the court system. He would make their life miserable, but instead he just paid them to go away. So what does that tell you?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, obviously, in the short term, there's a lot of upheaval and a lot of uncertainty about the future of WWE. Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan are the new co-CEOs, much like Chyna and Chris Jericho back in the year 2000, sharing the Intercontinental Championship. What kind of mischief will Stephanie and Nick get into? But there's that. There's also Bruce Pritchard seems to be the new point man. Like, whoa, Bruce Pritchard, head of creative, head of all that stuff.
That won't last long.
No, I don't think it will either.
I think Vince's whole crew is gone.
Inner circle, yeah. Like we saw it with John Laurinaitis. Like Kevin Dunn is a rumored name to be out next.
Well, I read some stuff last night about Kevin Dunn, like how they would book the divas to stay at the TV hotel, and they'd hear. I think it was Paul London and Brian Kendrick talking about Ashley Massaro. Yeah. God rest her soul. And she'd hear the knock at the door and not want to answer the door because it was one of those freaking creeps. Yeah. I just don't. It's just such ego. They lived in this wrestling bubble, right, for years and years. And to me, this is like the summation. So this happening to Vince, to me, is like a culmination of speaking out, right? It's like they cut off the arms and now they're cutting off the head. Yeah. Of just this whole, Vince inherited the territories. The WWE is essentially all those toxic practices that were around in the territory system, all absorbed into this thing that's the WWE, right? Yeah. It's a weird, complicated history with WWE. When you really go down the rabbit hole and figure out where it all came from, it's like a very bizarre origin story. It's like a Voltron, you know what I mean? Mid-South. WCW, Memphis. So we see with Vince out of creative, out of it all now. Not just symbolically, not just for optics. He gone apparently, unless he isn't. But if he's gone, then I think the creative direction could have we could see some very different things with creative in the next few weeks. I would think. To me, I think we really won't see. Assuming things change, assuming Bruce is gone. Assuming Kevin Dunn is eventually gone within, say, a month to 6 weeks. I think you really won't be able to see the fingerprints of a new regime till, Survivor Series. Yeah. Just because it takes you got to get your ducks in a row. You got to figure out who you're pushing. Maybe they'll hire back some of the people. Maybe, The Fiend will show up again if his issue was with Vince. Maybe Sasha Banks and Bayley will appear. It's just who do you give it to? Do you just turn the keys over to Paul Heyman with Triple H as kind of like the yay or nay? I was gonna say Michael Hayes for a second. No, he's also part of the inner circle. I would not be surprised if he was another shoe to drop. Michael Hayes, who was sent to rehab for saying incendiary things to Mark Henry at the WrestleMania 22 after party. Long time ago. But Look it up, folks. People still remember it, yeah. I wonder if there will be some internal motivation from no matter who's in charge to be we got to keep the spirit. What would Vince have wanted, WWVKMD. That's the thing, too. Vince doesn't work for them. Yeah, but he's a phone call away. He's a phone call away, and it's even been mentioned in investor notes, in official documents about the company itself for investors. Vince McMahon being in charge is the key to WWE's success. Well, let's prove that. Let's prove that theory. If he's not there anymore, how will WWE do? Not just from a financial aspect, from a creative aspect. I don't think it can get much worse with Vince out of creative, but I think it would maybe get better. I can't speculate on who's going to be pushed or what's going to happen, but it's the consistency, the quality control, there has to be an improvement from that, right? At the very least, it will be more organized. Mm-hmm. The scripts aren't going to get torn up 2 hours before the show. I really hope that they just make a list of all these tropes that Vince has established and leaned on for years and just very consciously avoid all that stuff.
I want to see him call them belts again. They're not just titles; they're championship belts. By gum. You know, we can talk about the negatives of Vince McMahon all day, and I'm sure there's more things that are going to come in this conversation. But you know, it's interesting, kind of two camps where people want to like dump on Vince and do all this stuff, or people who just want to kind of gloss over that stuff and say, "Thank you, Vince, you're the best. You've done so much for us as fans, whatever." And I think it's a little bit of both. I think these two things are not mutually exclusive. I think that Vince McMahon can be credited with a lot of people being fans because, hey, he made WWF, WWE, and then it just spreads out to everyone. So Vince McMahon is responsible for all that. And I think he gets credit for that and gets credit for kind of like shaping the way we, especially in America, perceive and ingest and analyze wrestling like to this day. There are positives, I think, to his legacy amidst all the warts.
Yeah, I mean, what Vince did was inevitable. Somebody had to do it. Somebody had to jump on the cable thing and make a national wrestling promotion. If nobody had done that, wrestling would have fizzled out largely, I think, just because media now is global, not even national. I can't say there's anybody more in my life who's influenced me creatively and just my taste, my perception of not only wrestling but art in general more than Vince. I don't feel comfortable yet like celebrating Vince, you know, as a man, but I mean, I'll still put on like a episode of Superstars from 1988 and just revel in the weirdness. You know, it's creatively, he is a very weird dude. Yeah. Why is Brother Love's face red? Why Akeem? Why Jameson? Why? You know, he's just.
Yeah, I mean, I've come up with so many adjectives and phrases and terms to describe Vince, and it just goes back and forth between positive and negative, where it's like, he's a savvy marketer, he's a smut peddler, he is a creative powerhouse, he's
the last of the snowmen, really, the last of the old carny snowmen.
Yeah, he's carny as hell, like, he comes from that,
he's like the last of the great carnies, man, I feel, you know? Mm-hmm. Now it's a little bit more above board, it's a little more honest, like...
Yeah, it's like that happens. And I think that, you know, you were saying before we were rolling that, you know, the mark of any, you know, real creative person or any artist is that they are a complicated person. They have complicated things going on. Like there is positives, there are negatives there. I think, like, let me ask you this question. This is kind of something I saw on a Facebook post, and I'm going to rephrase this as a question to you. Do you think that Vince McMahon left wrestling better than he found it?
God, that is a doozy, man. That's like a book in of itself. I would say yes and no, because he definitely, I mean, less people now than ever watch wrestling. That is a fact. Mm-hmm. But that's also just a consequence of there's so much more media out there, you know? You used to have to go to a video store and pick out a video. Now I can watch one of
literally
2,000
anything on my phone.
Exactly, yeah. And then MMA showed up, which kind of marginalized the wrestling audience. I would say yes, just because, I mean, basically the format of Dynamite is a WWE format. You got the Titantron, you got the interviews in the back.
Yeah. I mean, WWE has innovated and like created everything that I think wrestling has kind of like ripped off ever since. Like you mentioned the set. You know, WWE was the first to really get a hold of how the streaming works. You know, like I mean, the WWE Network begat every other streaming wrestling service you know of today. Like they were the first ones to really do it in that format, and like everyone's trying to do it afterward. They were the first ones to really get a hold of the pay-per-view market and understand that. Like WWE as a business entity has been like the trendsetter for wrestling in America, for good or for bad creatively, when it comes to production, when it comes to aesthetic. Like that's all WWE, it's all Vince. And like I said, for better or for worse, everyone at some point has done something to emulate it or taken a piece from it. And that's all, again, that's Vince.
Definitely, yeah. WWE is in the DNA of, I think, pretty much every wrestling company in the world. I mean, New Japan has Money in the Bank, and they're like as pure as an old school as a wrestling promotion as you can get, and they even still... I would say Vince, you know, vanguarded a lot of concepts. I don't know if he always used them the best, if he utilized them all to their full potential. Like WWE has just left. They made a history of just leaving money on the table. You know what I mean? With the WCW thing, Ric Flair coming into WWF back in the day, no main event with Hulk Hogan. and yet they've managed to be wildly successful. I mean, they're making more money than they've ever made with largely mediocre programming, right?
It's true. They are the McDonald's of wrestling, I would say. It's like, yes, they are the most profitable, but maybe arguably not the best, unless you like McDonald's. I don't know. I like chicken nuggets every once in a while.
Don't want to eat it every day. I mean, if they had if they had these TV deals, and then they also like had really good programming and were selling out everywhere, and the booking wasn't so homogenized and dated, they could be even bigger. Like at full power, with all of their capacities, at full throttle, there's nobody that could touch them because they're so far ahead. But they stubbed their toe, they got behind, and then AEW sprouted up, and now people are aware of all these different alternatives.
Vince McMahon, he seemed to be, especially in those later years, and you would hear stories about this, like the stubbornness, like his creative decisions would seemingly run counter to what the conventional wisdom was. There was always the trope. It's like, well, the fans can see what's coming. We got to change it because the fans can't know. They can't know more as much as us. And I feel that, Vince was partly responsible for that. And sometimes, like you said, it would leave money on the table. We've talked a lot in this video so far about Vince the businessman and his impact and stuff and him leaving. But let's talk about Vince the character. Because I think that, you could talk about it and you could rank all these different wrestlers. I think Vince McMahon is probably one of the most interesting just characters on screen in wrestling history. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I think he's top 5 heels for sure, wrestler or non-wrestler. He kind of took that little germ of what Eric Bischoff did and made it better. That's kind of Vince's thing. He takes other people's ideas, he takes pre-established talent mostly, and then injects it with some
lethal dose.
With a lethal dose of WWE
magic,
and makes it bigger, puts the polish on it. I mean, Vince. I mean, the highlight reels of all the crazy stuff, especially like the Vince that really stands out in my mind is kind of the post WCW, what I call like the repugnant Vince period, where he's swollen and his face is red and he's doing all the creepy stuff with the divas and he's in the church with Shawn Michaels and he's the ECW champion, and it's kind of like his weird egotistical victory lap.
Yeah, he's like doing all the things that would like A, piss everyone off, and B is just like things I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be ECW champion. I always wanted to wear a do-rag, pal.
Yeah,
like that whole post-buyout thing where there was a big run where Vince was just like turning everything up. Like, oh, you thought I was evil and perverted in 98, 99? Oh, wait till you get low to be now in the new decade. It was just like everything was amped up with him. I honestly think like some of his best stuff was, I talked about this in a video a long time ago, when Mr. McMahon went to Memphis, and we got the first kind of seeds of that character where he wasn't so over the top yet, but he was just smarmy and kind of a prick and very elitist to the Memphis market. That stuff was really fascinating to see, and it's something where you get the idea like, man, he had this in the back of his mind for a very long time. It wasn't something that just kind of fell into his lap in 1997 with the Montreal screw job. It was like, oh, he's always kind of wanted to do this.
This is the guy who idolized Buddy Rogers and Dr. Jerry Graham, and Dr. Jerry Graham bleached his hair blonde when he was 13 years old, and they drove in Jerry Graham's convertible, and Jerry Graham lit the cigars with the $100 bills. Like, all that stuff stuck with him. He wanted to be a wrestler, but his dad was like, hell no.
Yeah. Fascinating stuff to see him as a character. We don't want to talk about as a wrestler because he's not, his wrestling matches have always, from a technical standpoint, always left something to be desired. But I mean, they made memories. They made some of those,
the image of him at WrestleMania 19,
peering over,
just arising with like
that is like my top Vince just moment in time from that, because him peering over with the blood, that image encapsulates everything about Vince McMahon pretty much. Like you would want to know about that character. I thought it was perfect.
At least the inner Vince, it's like a vision into, like if somebody like read Vince, if a psychic met Vince, that's like the image that would pop into their head. Like, this is a turning point because, I'm interested now, depending on who they put in charge of creative. I mean, if they get rid of the writers and they're like, okay, Paul Heyman, you have Raw with 2 people you choose to run your show, and Triple H or whoever, you have your little team doing SmackDown, and the paths never cross. They keep it, I'd like to see the brands be like brands. They don't cross paths. They only meet, like the big four, which, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Royal Rumble, Survivor Series. If they really revamp the product and make it good again and make it interesting and make it fresh and get rid of all those tropes,
yeah,
I think they really have a potential to bring a lot of people in, especially because, I'm a fan of AEW, but AEW is kind of stale right now with all the people they've lost, and you get through your initial set of booking ideas that you've had for years and years, and then it's like, okay, now what?
Like you said, turning point. I was bringing up earlier how they've publicly said the success of the company lives and dies with Vince McMahon. Turning point, big time. It's gonna see you mentioned we might not see the full ramifications of this for weeks or for months even. Yeah, I think it could draw up interest because a lot of people were being turned away and kind of walking away from WWE because of X, Y, or Z reason that ultimately boils down to Vince McMahon in terms of creative or who they hire or who they fire and what happens in their product. So maybe Vince leaving would be something to encourage people to maybe get back into it because, I was tired of whatever, or at the very least just out of curiosity, a morbid curiosity to see what comes next.
To me, it's like akin to when George Lucas sold Star Wars to Disney. And now they're like, oh my god, they're bringing back Luke Skywalker and Han Solo and Princess Leia. To me, if they can recapture kind of not the look, because you wouldn't always move on production-wise, but just kind of the feel of old WWF, where it was so organized. The superstars after WrestleMania, Dino Bravo's in the ring, and you have Hercules up in the little bubble talking, and it's like, okay, that's who Hercules is going to feud with next. And it's just so rewards you for following along, which it does not do now.
No, absolutely. And none of these things are going to happen overnight. I can't imagine that this is going to be, it's automatically better again or it's automatically worse. There is going to be some upheaval, and we still don't know where the power structure is going to shake down when this is all over with. You mentioned, let's put Paul Heyman in charge of the book. Let's put Triple H in. You know what I would love? I would love to see someone who's been in wrestling for less than 10 years get the charge of the book. Just for once.
Hey, call up Brett Lauderdale. Hey, man, you want to book Raw?
Right.
Make it as grungy and dirty and crunchy as you possibly can. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be good with that.
Get Pritchard out, get Bischoff out, get Heyman out, get Triple H out. Just all new blood. Let's just start fresh. And let's just have a whole new beginning.
Nobody born before 1975 on the booking team.
They're not allowed. You gotta believe there's a crop of guys that Triple H definitely believed in that, many of them aren't with the company anymore. And you can, if Triple H has more power, if Vince isn't overseeing that stuff, maybe in a year, 2, 3 years, we'll see some of those guys who went to AEW kind of migrate their way back. That'd be very interesting to think about.
Just this whole just all the firings and all the crazy backstage stuff that's happened in WWE in the last year. Mm-hmm. I don't know if Vince knew this was coming. Maybe he did. Maybe he got the Iggy. But it just seems like the flailing of somebody that's caught in a whirlpool. And as they're circling the drain, they're they're scrambling, they're making all these changes, they're doing all this stuff just to try and survive, and there you go.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to add a quick little addendum to this video that I think it's important to talk about. Something that Mister and I kind of skirted around and briefly alluded to, but didn't really explicitly dive into, was more about the future of the corporate culture in WWE with Vince McMahon's retirement. Not so much the creative aspect of things, but the way just things are done. As we mentioned in that video, Vince is the ultimate carny, and he kind of ran WWE like a carny. And there is a rich history of stories and legends of just the absolute dirt worst toxic behavior from those in charge and various scandals that have taken place over the years, both confirmed and others highly alleged. And a lot of that it starts from the top up. I've said this before about videos when it came to the way certain people were allegedly bullied in WWE, and I said then, and I'll say it again, that kind of culture cannot change unless there's change at the very top. And now we're here. The very top has been changed. It's not Vince McMahon up top anymore. Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan are there. I can't speak to, there's no reports on how the boys seem to treat Nick Khan or think of him, but there is that general reputation that Stephanie has of being well liked, and it's more positive, and the morale is up with her in charge. And so I don't know how that might trickle down into HR stuff
and things of that nature. But I would have to imagine, like, you know, the thing with Vince McMahon is we can talk about the good and the bad he's done for wrestling, and the good, you know, despite all the good he had done for WWE, the longer he was there, the longer the company was going to suffer. It was just an issue of when he was going to leave. And some would argue he should have left a long time ago. But for whatever reason, he didn't. And now, for whatever reason, he is. And yeah, I think this is the time. Like, you know, there's the turning point, not just creatively, things changing. That remains to be seen. But I think one thing to definitely keep note of is the future of the corporate culture. How many stories like this will we hear in the future of people like of something that Michael Hayes allegedly did, or John Laurinaitis allegedly did, or Kevin Dunn? You know, if all those people, if all those dominoes fall and they're gone, then, you know, what will the upper crust, what will the upper makeup of WWE look like in those similar departments? And will that culture change? Time will tell.
Needless to say, there's a lot more to this story that's going to come down in the coming weeks. I mean, we've just kind of exhausted ourselves of things we can say about this, and I'm sure a lot of other people have said similar things. What do you think about Vince McMahon retiring? I mean, you could write a book with what this means for wrestling, what Vince has meant to wrestling for the good and the bad.
Probably 2 books.
Yeah, gosh. It'd be the whole season of Dark Side of the Ring would be all about Vince McMahon, not just one episode. There is so much more to talk about this and delve into that, you know, we'll get into it as it comes and as it comes to us, no doubt, and with every story that might break as a result of this, I'm sure. But what do you all think of this news, folks? Obviously, it's a huge story with many ramifications we're going to feel for a long time. We want to hear your thoughts about this in the comments section, and I'm sure more things might be coming out. We'll be talking about this in the future. But yeah, stay tuned is all we can say. So
thank you for the memories, and thank you for Hulkamania.
Yeah, and thanks for all the fish. For Mister OohLaLa, I'm Brian Zane, and we'll see you next time.